Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Talking Point. My name is Faraz Patel. We are coming to you live from Hilaal TV, channel 347 on DSTV. I'll be in your company for the next 45 to 50 minutes. Tonight, we are discussing the crisis of governance within South Africa and whether any of our politicians are really there to serve the interests of South Africans. We know the current crisis that is happening within various issues within South Africa. And to discuss this crisis of governance, I'd like to welcome Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki. He is the Deputy Chair for the South African Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Mbeki, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be on your show.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. Mr. Mbeki, I want to start off, obviously, recently what had happened on Monday night. Now, I don't want to discuss who and who was drawn into the various ministerial positions. But when you look at this cabinet reshuffle, and you look at the names that are there, and the recycling of many of these names, is this really the best this ruling party can give the people of South Africa?
Well, it is the best that the ANC has got. You remember, the ANC is choosing its own members, especially members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. So it is not choosing from the broad population of South Africa. It is choosing from ANC members to be politicians, which is the correct way to go. That's what democracy and that's what the Constitution demands, is that you choose members of your own party. But what we are seeing is that the ANC has a very, very limited pool of competent people. That is really the message that we're getting. Or maybe put it in another way, there is a small group that controls the ANC that gives itself these very cushy jobs to be members of the Blue Light Brigade. And they are sitting there virtually for as long as they live. They want to sit there and be members of the Blue Light Brigade and enjoy life with to race up and down the highways and not having to stop on the traffic lights and push the rest of us out of the road to make way for them. So that is the people who control the ANC who are staying there. But of course, we know that they are not very competent people. A shining example of their incompetence is 17 years of load shedding, and they still haven't fixed it. It's been going on this is the 17th year of load shedding, and they still haven't fixed it. So this inner elite of the ANC that controls the power of the ANC, controls the power of the party, is not particularly competent. They can't fix the unemployment. They can't fix the electricity. They can't. Well, really, they can't fix the airline. So this inner circle is having a wonderful time. They are living large themselves, but they are not solving the country's problems.
Mr. Mbeki, the biggest hair scratcher of them all, I mean, both you and I read the Zondo Commission into state capture and the recommendations that came from there. And ministers who currently occupy these important positions are there. And the Zondo recommendation stated that they shouldn't be even anywhere near a ministerial position. And yet on Monday, some of these ministers are occupying either ministerial positions or deputy ministerial positions or even DG positions, and you're asking yourself, again, is this what is given to us? And do we as citizens of the country deserve these people who have been recommended by the Zondo Commission to not even go anywhere near these important public service positions?
Well, I think the message that I read is that the ANC no longer cares about serving the people of South Africa. It cares about serving its own members. And in a way, we are seeing this in the metros, in the fight for positions in the metros. The ANC in the Gauteng metros has teamed up with EFF to get positions. So it's more to do with positions for ANC members than looking after the welfare of the country or looking after the welfare of the population of South Africa at large. That's how I understand, which is why commissions like the Zondo Commission, they're very professional jobs, which go in depth into problems of corruption, maladministration, and so on, but they just get ignored. They just get ignored by the people in power, and that is that's why I was saying we have this ruling clique inside the ANC that sees itself as above the law, and it does whatever it wants, and it doesn't give. It is not concerned about the welfare of the country. It's not concerned. For example, the country was grey listed a week or so ago, but the ANC government has been warned for a long time to get its act together to control money laundering and those kinds of things, but it couldn't be bothered. So the country is now blacklisted with all the negative consequences that go with it. So I think this inner clique of the ANC, which, as you point out, keeps reappointing itself to positions or shuffling amongst themselves, doesn't really care about the future of South Africa anymore. It used to, but it doesn't anymore. And in a way, I think sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Mbeki, they used to. So the ANC comes into power in 1994. I've heard on various platforms you spoke about, lack of governance or crisis in governance had already started in the National Party. Apartheid gets defeated, the ANC comes in, the good intentions are there to try and fix the country, 300, 400 years of colonialism, to try and allow the majority of the people, which are Black Africans, to have the basic human rights. And then we see, in the last 10 to 15 years, their lack of ability to govern properly. How did they lose that ability? Because the political elite starts getting richer, and as you say, they detach themselves away from the real ground problems that the country faces.
Well, I think one of the most important milestones of the elite detaching themselves from the people was Black economic empowerment. So the ANC was a multiracial organization during the struggle against apartheid. It fought against apartheid from the late 40s onwards. If you remember, there was, after the riots, the communal riots in Durban in 1949, the three doctors, Dr. Toma, who was from the ANC, Dr. Naika, and Dr. Dadworth, Indian doctors, they got together and designed a strategy to unify all the communities of South Africa to fight against apartheid. It was called the Doctors' Pact. And when the program of starting the fight against apartheid started, the two main volunteers who were chosen to lead the defiance of the apartheid laws, one was an African, the other was an Indian. The one was Yusuf Kachalia from the Transvaal Indian Congress, and the other one was Nelson Mandela, and they were the leaders of the huge campaign to defy the apartheid laws in the early 1950s. And from then onwards, the ANC became this multiracial organization for the next 40, 50 years in the fight against apartheid. But suddenly in 2003, 2004, the ANC decided, no, we are going to benefit the blacks only. Never mind the whites who had fought with us in the trenches, never mind the Indians, never mind the colors, and we're going to have a policy that benefits the Africans only, which we call Black economic empowerment. And that, in my view, is the beginning of the road.
After the break, we'll continue our conversation with Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki. We'll be delving into coalition politics and just how much of power the ANC has lost and how does that shape the future going forward for the political sphere of the country. Do stay tuned to Talking Point. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki, the Deputy Chair for the South African Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Mbeki, we saw in the last local government elections in 2021 just how much of power the ANC had lost in the metros and municipalities. First question is, it speaks of their lack of governance in terms of conviction of the residents and the people of those various municipalities. But number two, it shows how much of the trend of coalition politics is taking center stage. When we talk coalition politics, the word unstable generally comes into the discussion. Is that something that we as citizens need to be concerned, given what we have seen within the metros and municipalities, its lack of ability to deliver basic service delivery while we have squabbles happening in various sitting councils?
Yes, I think this is a worrying trend amongst the small parties, let me put it that way, because what we have been seeing was that from 1994 up until 2021, the ANC was a dominant party. It was so dominant, all other parties were very small relative to the ANC. And all they tried to do to try and become relevant was to attack the ANC, to criticize the ANC. And this became even more accentuated during the presidency of President Jacob Zuma. So the opposition parties, instead of developing their policies of how they are going to improve the country, how they're going to improve how they're going to come up with new policies that benefited the people of South Africa. They spend all those opposition years just attacking the ANC, and we saw EFF took this to the most extreme form where they were just wrecking parliament, behaving the way that they did in parliament. But they didn't make the debate. They didn't even participate in the debate. They were just opposing and disrupting. So that's what has been happening to it. Now, the ANC has lost the majorities in the metros and in the big cities. The opposition parties, who amongst themselves are now fighting amongst themselves for positions, not for policies. They don't have policies for sorting out the problems that the people face. They're fighting amongst themselves. Who is going to be mayor? Who is going to be speaker? Who is going to be member of the mayor committee, and so on and so forth. But they don't have policies about moving the metros forward, solving the sewage problems of the municipality, the water problems, paying for the electricity that the municipalities buy from buy from ESCOM. So that is what has happened, is that these little parties are now trying to feed from this trough instead of coming up with solutions to the country's problem. It's a sad situation, but we as the voters have to keep trying to persuade them to focus on solutions, not to focus on jobs. I think the bad habit that the inner clique of the ANC has developed, has now generated a very bad habit amongst political leaders, even of small parties, in that they want to be small cliques who spend their time eating rather than serving the people. So this is the example that they are taking from the ANC, the inner circle of the ANC. They think when you become elected, you must use that for consuming rather than for solving the problems that the people expect you or elected you to solve. It's a sad situation for South Africa, but that's where we are.
Mr. Mbeki, constituencies allows there to be direct accountability to citizens. The electoral reform is something that the ANC has clearly not been a major fan of. Would it be fair to say that as the ANC gets potentially closer to losing majority of the power within South Africa, they'll be wanting to make sure that this electoral reform does not take into full effect, which allows the constituencies to have accountability? Because if there's accountability directly to the citizen, it gives more power to the people.
Yes, you say the ANC. Oh, okay, let me take one step back.
Sure.
At CODESA, if you remember CODESA, in the early 90s, it was agreed that the first and the second elections would be pure proportional representation. The reason for this was because the apartheid regime had not had a national census of the whole of South Africa. Yeah, if you remember, they had their Bantustans, Transkei, Ciskei, Venda, whatever you. So they did not take population census in those so-called independent homelands, like what were called the TBVC states, Transkei, Bophuthatswana, Venda, what am I missing? Ciskei. So there was no national census of the population of South Africa. There was only census in those parts that the apartheid regime considered to be South Africa. So you couldn't have a constituency system, a proper national constituency system, when there was no national population census, because we couldn't allocate in a constituency, you have to try and get an equal number of people in the same constituency. So for the first election in 94 and the next one after that, it was accepted that we won't have constituencies. But after that, there was a population census, and we have had several population censuses since democracy. So we have the methods with which to have constituencies, which is what brings the politician at the national and provincial level closer to the voter and closer to the people. I mean, you and me, we don't have members of parliament, because the guys who are sitting in our National Assembly, we just elected the party. We didn't elect a member of parliament. So they are not accountable to us. And they are accountable to the party. Now the ANC has been blocking the introduction of the, and they are still blocking it, by the way, even today, the introduction of constituencies. And that's one of the reasons that makes the ANC government itself unaccountable. Because at the end of the day, they are the national government, but they're not accountable to the citizen, which is one of the reasons why we have so much corruption in this country, is because the government actually is not accountable to the electorates.
Mr. Mbeki, before we go to the break, is it fair to say that if there's no accountability, the opportunity for corruption can continue to grow, especially for a party that potentially could lose majority of their power given the current voter roll?
Yes, you say if there's no cost to non-delivery, let me say, or inability to deliver, then what is the politician there to do? What is he doing there? He's doing that to please himself. And that is really becomes the big driver of corruption that we have seen in South Africa in the past 2 decades, if you wish. So that's been the problem that we're faced with. However, the voters, even with the proportional representation, have sent out a message to the ANC that the people are now fed up with their lack of accountability, their lack of policies that uplift the country. Because at the end of the day, why should people vote for a party that is not uplifting the party? We're sitting with 45% unemployment in South Africa. So the population, the voters are saying, no more, we're not going to vote for these guys. And they can see that they will not get the majority in the next election next year. But the other aspect of that, of course, is that many of them are saying, hey guys, we must eat now before we lose power in 2024. So you are getting the corruption being accelerated, so to speak, on the way to 2024.
After the break, we discuss the one plague that hits South Africa every single day. That is, of course, the energy crisis. But from a governance perspective, and is there really a way for that to be solved to have consistent energy? After the break, my conversation with Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki continues. To stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm continuing my discussion with Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki from the SA Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Mbeki, we saw the interview a couple of weeks ago on another broadcaster with former Eskom CEO Andre de Ruyter. Obviously, so much was spoken, but one of them is, of course, the influence within the ANC at the power utility. Now, what sticks out from there is a classic example of, I scratch your back, you will scratch mine. If there is no benefit for the politicians to have something from Eskom, well, they just basically won't care about the current energy crisis.
Absolutely. I mean, the best example is an ANC company called Chancellor House being awarded a huge contract together with Hitachi in the build of these new power stations that were started to be built, I think, in 2008. Now, how does the ANC become a contractor? How does this company become a contractor to contract to build boilers in a power station? They have zero knowledge of that. So they use their political power as the government of South Africa to award contracts to an ANC company, which was called Chancellor House. And of course, this is the one that we know about. I'm sure there are many other companies which are linked to the ANC that we don't know about, because there was such an uproar about Chancellor House and Hitachi that the people, there was such an uproar in the country that they would then, from then onward, hide the companies that they use to milk ESCOM and to milk other state-owned enterprises like Transnet and so on.
Mr. Beki, we saw obviously in this week Mr. Kgothientsho Ramokgopa, Dr. Kgothientsho Ramokgopa, becoming the new Minister of Electricity, a new portfolio which reports directly to the presidency. Now, we know his track record with Tshwane, a pretty good one at that. But if you're sitting as a citizen of South Africa, you're asking yourself, you've got two ministries and departments, public enterprises, mineral resources and energy. What difference is a third one really going to make? Because you heard the ESCOM leadership saying load shedding is going to be around for the next 1 to 2 years. And as a citizen, how much confidence can you really look at this new portfolio and ask yourself, they can actually solve this energy crisis?
Well, I think the government, the ANC government, is sending us, the public, and the voters and the electorate on a wild goose chase. They're giving us what they say is a messiah. This is the savior, this messiah who is going to save South Africa from load shedding. The problem of load shedding is fundamentally the problem of lack of investment in the economy of South Africa, lack of investment in ESCOM, corrupt practices in ESCOM, bringing ANC companies, mismanaging the design of the power stations. Those are the causes of load shedding. That we bringing one individual and making him minister. How is it going to give us a new power station? It won't build a new power station. It won't stop the corruption that we see in ESCOM. That director gave us in detail of what is happening, for example, in power stations in Mpumalanga and so on. One individual is not going to solve such problem, but the government wants us to think there is a messiah, and this messiah has these fantastic qualifications. He's even a doctor, no less. They don't put that he's not a doctor of medicine who can cure you, but anyway, he's called a doctor, and so they say we must put our hope in this one individual to solve a massive institutional failure of the ANC. Well, he is not going to be able to do it. I feel sorry for him. I saw him being interviewed on television yesterday. I feel sorry for the guy. Okay, he's being given a cushy job. He now has blue light brigade to drive him around, so he doesn't have to stop at traffic lights. If there are any traffic lights left, he can just go past. So now, he's a big man, so he's so happy to accept, but he can't solve the huge institutional and policy failure of the ANC government. The ANC government's policies have failed, and that is the crux of the matter. Whether it concerns electricity or it concerns rail transport, air transport, the ANC's policies have failed, and that's all there is to it. And there is no individual who can salvage that situation. Bringing this individual or that individual to save South Africa or to find a solution to the systemic failure of the ANC government is no solution. I think we all know that, but the government wants to say, look, guys, here is a messiah. You listen what the messiah would. Stop complaining. Let's give him a time to give him a chance to solve your problem. Give him a chance until we get re-elected next year So they will say, this man is working very hard to solve your problem. After they get re-elected, of course, they kick him out and it's business as usual.
Yeah, it'll either be a case of either him being a messiah or lambs to the wolves. Mr. Mbeki, I want to shift the attention from the SOEs to obviously student protests that happened last week. Now, we saw obviously what had happened at Wits, protesting a lot of public infrastructure being pulled down. You hear the plight of these students, and then you get the Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Blade Nzimande, saying, well, the universities need to make life much more easier for the students. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a classic case of this ministry or this department detaching themselves away from the problems students have. Again, a classic case of, is there really a connection between those in power and the students who just want to have the basic right of having tertiary education?
Well, again, you see, this government is more interested in consumption rather than in building the country. It's more interested in getting the so-called black middle class to live large, to have a wonderful lifestyle. That is really more the priority of the government. So instead of building the skills of young people in South Africa, it is creating all these subterfuge that it is doing. I was a student in the United Kingdom in the 1960s, and I was in exile. I had political asylum in the United Kingdom. I got a scholarship from the British government, and most of the students got scholarships from the government. They were not loans; they were bursaries, which we didn't have to pay back. Why? Because the British government knew that this was an investment in the skills of young people, and don't put an obstacle in the way of these young people. Encourage them to study hard. And so we had bursary. It's only when the United Kingdom had paid all its loans, which came from the Second World War, and the country had become much richer, that they then introduced this kind of loan system. South Africa should be having free bursary. If a student pass their matric at bachelor level, they should get a free bursary to go and study. We need skilled manpower or human power in this country, and not what the government is doing with NSFAS and this means testing and all this kind of razzmatazz. They think they're being very clever, this one will get, that one will not get, there is a missing middle, and they have all this sophistry. But when you look at the top civil service in this country, a couple of years ago, the then Minister of Finance, Minister Mboweni, pointed out that there are millionaires who are in the public service. He said there are nearly 30,000 administrators in the public service who are paid R1 million a year. So the guys who pass the laws, the members of parliament themselves, a member of parliament in South Africa gets paid R1 million. The minute he walks inside the parliament and sits down and does nothing, falls asleep, he earns R1 million. So that's where the money is going, instead of this money going to young people to give them bursaries so that they can study and stop fighting the universities and the government. We should have a bursary system, full stop, and build the education, the cadre of South Africa. That's because apartheid created so much havoc with the emergence of skills in South Africa, it will take us another 50 years to build skills levels that equate to countries in Asia, for example, to China, to India. It will take us another 50 years to come to the skills levels of those countries. So we have to be investing in the education of our young people, not messing around with missing middles and things like that. We should have a proper bursary system. For example, kids who pass their maths and science with distinction should also get free bursaries up to PhD level, because we need them. It shows their talent, and it also shows their parents are willing to, because that's how many of these kids get distinctions, is because they pay tutors to help their children with their maths and science. I have many friends whose children are now doctors and all that, but they had to pay the parents. They had to pay tutors for their children to be able to pass their maths and science at the level that is required to enter medicine, for example, engineering, and so on, and economics, and so on and so forth. The parents made a huge investment. So the government should be helping the parents and supporting the parents in the effort that they are making to overcome our problem in science and maths. Instead, they're creating obstacles.
Oh,
it's sad, it's pathetic. Really, it is pathetic, because they want these top echelons in government and in parliament and in the provincial administrators, municipal managers, to earn huge amounts of money. Do you know, Mr. Patel, that we have the most expensive government in the world as a percentage of gross domestic product? These guys who are sitting in government, they pay themselves so much money. We have the most expensive government in the world. And that government expenditure is not going to maintaining roads, to maintaining railways. It's going to salaries and the big mansions that these people live in. So it's a sad situation. Anyway, but we have to always remember, we have a democracy in South Africa. We can vote against a failed government, a government that has failed us. We can replace it with another one. So we shouldn't spend too much time crying. We must devote time mobilizing people to vote for new. But the new parties must come up with policies, not just saying, I'm against the ANC. No, we want policies. They must tell us, how are they going to solve unemployment? How are they going to solve the housing problem? We have millions and millions of people living in slums and shanty towns, in Diepsloot, in Orange Farm, all over the country. How are they going to solve that problem? That's what we want, not for these parties to be telling us, oh, I want to be mayor of Ekurhuleni, I want to be mayor of Tshwane. That's all that they're doing, these little parties, is they're telling us, oh, I want to be mayor of Ekurhuleni, I want to be mayor of Johannesburg, I want to be mayor of Tshwane, I want to be mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, of eThekwini. But how do they solve the problems? No, you don't get an answer about how are they going to solve this massive housing backlog in South Africa. We have millions of people living in shanty towns. That's not proper accommodation for us to raise a healthy population. We have to have proper housing, not these pondokis called what do they call them? RDP houses.
Mr. Mbeki, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're going to have to go for a break to pay the bills. But just to close off at what you said, it's worth noting again, the economy did contract for the fourth GDP and the most unemployed people in South Africa is the youth. Stay tuned. We conclude our conversation with Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki after the break. Welcome back to Talking Point. Mr. Mbeki, just two questions before we wrap up this discussion. Friday, we were supposed to have the original cabinet reshuffle. Didn't happen. We saw President Cyril Ramaphosa, according to his spokesperson, having a cold. But then we saw him on that very same day, of course, attending a pala auction within the cattle. Social media exploded, as we are as South Africans. The question I want to ask is President Ramaphosa still interested being the president of this country?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, but my own guess is that the President Ramaphosa has lost interest in the job of being president of the country. I think when he wanted to be president, it looked very glamorous. You were flying all over the world, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Xi Jinping and President Biden and Vladimir Putin. So, Modi. So this was a glamorous job, and you flew in your own private plane. So I think for Mr. Ramaphosa, this was fantastic. He couldn't believe his luck. But now, after 2 or 3 years, this becomes routine. And now there are all these people demanding that he delivers. And there's Arthur Fraser, who is mobilizing behind his back, showing dollars under the sofa. And so it goes. Now he's thinking, hey, the fun is out of this job. Now I'm being asked to have to deliver, and he has lost interest. I mean, how many people did he choose in the cabinet reshuffle? Less than a dozen, and it has taken him how many months to reshuffle the cabinet? It shows the guy's not interested. He's more interested in his pala farm than in being president of South Africa.
Mr. Mbeki,
that is my own feeling.
Well, I think in the court of public opinion, you may not be alone in with regards to that, based on social media and so much of the voices that are coming from the ground. Mr. Mbeki, one final question. Voices of the ground. We, like you've always said, the beauty of democracy allows us to go to the polling stations and change the trajectory of South Africa. What now do we as citizens need to do to make sure that when we go to those polling stations, the power, ultimately, according to our constitution that was written by so many who gave their lives to fighting injustice in South Africa, can be realized within the people of South Africa, that they can make the change and that power can be taken away from the politicians because they ultimately serve the interests of the people of this country?
Yes, we do have, I think at the last count, we have something like 400 registered parties in South Africa. So we have to engage the league. And we have, if I'm not mistaken, 13 opposition parties in parliament. We, as the electorate and as the voter and as the citizens of South Africa, have to engage these 13 parties in parliament. We have to help them to come up with policies that will move the country forward. Instead of obsessing about Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, we have to help them to come up with policies that South Africa is an incredible country. The people of South Africa have enormous energy. They got rid of one of the most powerful governments in the world, not just in Africa, but in the world. It had nuclear weapons, the apartheid regime. So the people of South Africa have a lot of energy and have a lot of creativity. They got rid of a government with nuclear weapons. So we have to be patient though and engage these 13 parties in parliament and educate them about what are good policies and try and persuade them not to follow the ways of the inner clique of the ANC who are only concerned with their own consumption, with the blue lights and the extravaganza and showing off, which is what they do.
Mr. Mbeki, I wish we had more time to discuss so many things, but as they say, time is always the enemy when there's a good conversation. We'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Mbeki, for making the time for us and, of course, engaging us in this conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki, the Deputy Chair for the South African Institute of International Affairs. We're talking the crisis of governance within South Africa. And as we close, the citizens of South Africa need to be aware that in this democracy, we as the people can change the future of South Africa, and that's by going to the polls and making that vote. We are still over 1 year away from making that happen, but as we see what is happening in the country, it makes us more aware that as citizens, we need to exercise that power that is governed by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. From myself, Firas Patel, and the rest of the Talking Point team, we'd like to say Jazakallah to you for joining us here. We'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.